Welcome to the Weekend Sports Cars on the Marshall Pruitt Podcast for January 9th, presented by Cooper Tires, presented by someone who is often on the road, traveling, circumnavigating the world. Who might that be?
It's me! It's Graham Goodwin, and again, fate deals me a card that means that you are indeed talking to me from the other side of the world this evening in Buriram in Thailand, very rural Thailand, ahead of the AsLMS series this weekend.
Beautiful, beautiful thing. As we mentioned in last week's show, knowing that we had the Roar before the 24, IMSA's little wake-up call, hello to the world each year, first weekend in January, getting ready for the Rolex 24 at Daytona later this month. We told folks our normal hour and a half or so format's definitely going to be expanded a little bit this week, knowing that we have many, many questions on IMSA and other questions as well on ACO, FIWEC, all manner of good stuff, Mr. Goodwin. So we also have some carryover questions from last week, and I figure we have you for about 1 hour and 50 minutes. So
That's about right.
Why don't we be smart monkeys and get rocking and rolling with our listener-driven show? Which category should we start in, my friend?
Well, there's a heck of a lot of IMSA questions, and quite rightly so, with the roll before the 24. But let's crack on for the first time in a little wee while with the WEC AsLMS Series ACO category. Relatively few. It's a quiet time of year for that area of racing. Do you want to serve a couple up to me, young man?
I will, and I should also mention that it is approximately 8:10 in the morning here in Northern California, and there's some really, truly excellent FIA WEC news that is embargoed that should be coming out in a little bit under 5 hours. So, unfortunately, not going to be able to talk about it on this episode due to the embargo timing, but I know it will be a topic that we certainly look forward to diving into next week. But as you mentioned, yes, let's start with your world. Thanks again to DailySportsCar.com's Ryan Kish for doing an excellent job of assembling the WEC AsLM ACO questions, as we call them, WEC, AsLMS Series, and ACO. 61 questions this week. Yes, we are going to do our best to get to as many as we can. Let's go with our pal, Right Turn Lover. Will the WEC, despite having a different pit lane than IMSA, be using the traditional start-finish line for the Sebring 1,000 miles in March, thus effectively running not dissimilar to how the ALMS runs at Silverstone? Or will we have to get our heads around turn 17 not being Sunset Bend?
I'm pretty certain they're using exactly the same track format as for the 12 Hours of Sebring, but it is simply the pit lane and paddock that needs to be accommodated for the purposes of the start-finish. I've heard nothing different, MP. I don't know about you.
No, I haven't heard a thing, and I would not believe the good folks at Sebring would fashion a different start/finish line for the WEC for their Friday race just prior to the traditional Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring on Saturday. Let's go to James Betha. And James, I apologize, I'm still not sure if it's Bethay or Betha, but between those two, hopefully I got it. Didn't murder your last name too badly. Let's see. He says, besides the issue of not enough garages, what else is stopping the ACO from having a 70-ish car field for Le Mans? And would any of the organizers, teams, and manufacturers be open to that size of a grid?
I think the answer is it is a logistical problem of the pit lane. The pit lane would need further extension, and they're running out of space to do that, to actually have the cars with garages. The only available space at the moment is occupied by either the race control building. You can't go much further out than that because that would effectively cut off the current Bugatti circuit at pit in. And then pit out, you've got what now serves as the scrutineering area and Parc Fermé. So if they were to extend it, and there's a few good reasons why they might wish to do that, then it is very significant engineering work. And the problem with the pit out side of things is that does mean that the pit blend line extends around the first bend, and that could prove to be problematic. What we shouldn't forget either, it's not that long ago that we were not getting 70 cars, or teams rather, applying for a Le Mans entry. I think we're going to get significantly more than that this year, with a bit of a boost in the LMP2 squads. Certainly GT and GTE is looking pretty healthy. We're continuing, by the look of things, to get significant numbers of the factory teams asking for their North American cars to come across and play. It remains to be seen exactly which of those might come into play this time. And the surprise, I think, over the last year and a half has been the boom in GT-AM entries. Big numbers of the Pro-Am GTE class at the Le Mans 24 Hours. And I know that surprised the organisers. So remains to be seen what we're going to see in this two-tranche reveal of the final entry as to whether or not we're going to be getting into that mix that the ACO have previously liked to see, which is, broadly speaking, 30 prototypes and 30 GT cars. If we are, there are going to be some very significant disappointments among some very well-established LMP2 teams, and that, in no small part, is why we're seeing a number of those P2 teams, current and immediate future P2 teams, battling it out for automatic entries this weekend in Thailand, where normally we'd be seeing them in the European Le Mans Series.
Mateus Longo writes in from Facebook and asks regarding the WC. It's not yet clear to me, how will the car regulations, that being the 2020 hypercar regs, work regarding privateers? Will they be able to buy ERS systems from manufacturers? And what kind of chassis are they going to use? Are we going to see, for example, a Rebellion using an Areca chassis with the Toyota ERS system? Thanks, and a great racing year for everyone.
It's a great question, Mateus, and I think the answer here is a slightly complex one. The answer is that the savings are effectively caused for the privateers by that commercial arrangement whereby the OEMs, the manufacturers, should be providing at what you would imagine to be a reduced commercial rate those hybrid powertrain systems. But realistically, the format could lead to effectively modular cars, almost a mother chassis type thing, where there's nothing to say that, for instance, an Orica-built chassis shouldn't actually be styled as a number of different cars moving up and down the grid. So could it be a Rebellion styled as, say, for instance, we've talked about this before, potentially a TVR? It could be. It might be. But we don't yet know. We are waiting with bated breath to see who's going to be the first organisation, whether or not that be, we've heard obviously from Jim Glickenhaus and his people, Toyota are expecting to commit. We've heard others. You've seen written on Daily Sports Car that Ferrari is still in the mix. We absolutely know that Aston Martin is still in the mix. You've seen stories elsewhere which are not inaccurate about the interest with or without Aston Martin of Red Bull into the mix here. There are lots of factors coming into play to suggest that a number of significant players, and there is at least one more that is very close, I believe, to a commitment once the final figures have been crunched, that we might see some excitement, maybe not initially in year one, but in year two. How will it work for privateers? Any way they like, I think, is the answer. And I think there are a number of them that will be looking towards whether or not there might be a good marketing opportunity, perhaps with one of the more boutique marks, whether or not that be Brabham, Koenigsegg, you name it. Let's wait and see what actually emerges as we get closer to the point where these commitments have got to be made.
All righty. We are going to pick up a question from Nathaniel Ross. MP and GG, we all know that Ginetta can't run the G60 chassis directly in LMP1, since that would make them a factory effort and require a hybrid system, etc. But could they sell or lease the cars to a different team and enter them as a one-off entrant in one of the remaining WC races? Would love to see the car back on track.
It's a really good question, Nathaniel, and I will disagree with I think people know you're absolutely correct that Ginetta cannot enter the cars themselves. And there's two reasons they can't enter the cars themselves this current season. Number one, as you quite rightly say, it would be a factory entry. And number two is you can't enter an LMP1 car on a race-by-race basis. That is specifically excluded by regulation. So even if they were to find a different team to run those cars, because we're now into a full season, they cannot enter those cars. So the woes of the customer, the initial customer for the G60s, have paid a heavy price on that program, a very heavy price indeed. Could they enter as a one-off entrant? The answer, therefore, is no. Will we see them back this year? I think it's looking increasingly unlikely. I did think there was a possibility there might be a bit of a turn coming in the program that might get them to Sebring. I don't think we're now going to see that. So whatever is going forward with that program, I think they're now looking beyond the end of this season in terms of anything sustainable into next season, where the current cars will certainly still be legal, and I believe probably the season beyond that in some form, probably a grandfathered spec. So let's wait and see what emerges from Garforth. But it is fair to say, I think you're spot on, where others maybe have faltered in their understanding of the situation the program has found itself, is that they are not masters at the moment of their own destiny, because the season has started and they only have full season entries under the CFC TRSM Racing banner. If that team cannot fulfill the season-long obligation, it rather ties not one hand but both hands behind the back of Ginetta.
Next one comes in from Big Racer Boy, and I can answer this one quickly. It says, this one's been nagging me. Are there spec wheels used in the FIA, as in are there wheels to be put on any car that has to be sold in that car / prototype only, just to aid with BOP, EOT, whatever? Or can you put any center lock wheels that you want that aren't too heavy or too light? Wheels are indeed open. That is either manufacturer choice or team choice, so it's just a matter of fitment. So beyond that, wheels are wide open. Let's go to I Knew It for you. Says, hey guys, IMSA prototype challenge question with a broader FIA ACO follow-up. At the Michelin Encore, we saw one of the ATIS LMP3 cars, which, if memory serves, had decent pace before an issue sidelined it fairly early. At the time, the announcer seemed pretty confident in a full-season campaign with that car. Become the roar, they are nowhere to be found. Do we know what happened to them, and if we may see the 8S at IMSA events this season? To follow up, is there any sense of a concern from higher-ups in France that they can't seem to get a third LMP manufacturer, ATIS, Ave Riley, Jeanette, etc., to stick in any appreciable quantity? And says, from a pure number standpoint, the class seems quite healthy, but hashtag me personally, I would be worried how lack of constructor diversity would affect the class moving forward.
It's a long question, but an interesting one. As to what went on with the ADES car that was entered for the Encore, I genuinely don't know. In terms of the way forward, you may or may not be aware that there is a new set of regulations due, although this one slightly under the wire. This is now delayed. We have not had confirmation of what those regulations are going to look like, which sort of indicates that perhaps things are underway to recast what might have been announced there. What we do know is that 4 chassis suppliers have been selected, or in this case reselected. They are the two predominant suppliers at the moment, that being Ligier and Norma. ADES will be back, as will Ginetta. And the reasons for that market split, if you like, are long, not tedious, but certainly too involved for a podcast of this kind of length today. But it comes down to the ability initially of Ginetta to commit to their initial production run, some unhappiness from Ginetta with the service they perceived that they were getting from the principal powertrain supplier, at the same time as which Ligier were committing to large batch manufacture and were picking up large numbers of orders for that car. Norma then came in as a late addition to the pack after the Dome and Ave Riley programs had faltered, and they produced something which did seem to be a bit of a mold breaker, was very quick in a straight line, in certain conditions has been pretty dominant, and has certainly picked up friends in the marketplace. Ave Riley, never really made the breakthrough, I'm afraid, with their car. Initially tried in Europe, and then the single car that was ever out there racing, making some race starts in North America. ADES suffered terrible reliability problems in the early days of that program. Have made some breakthroughs in terms of some changes made to the car for reliability. Have had a little bit of success away from the pure LMP3 area, and oddly enough now in a mold breaking area with two separate cars in two completely separate programs. They're both hydrogen fueled, including the H24 car that we should, if plans come together, see racing against LMP3 cars in the Michelin Le Mans Cup this year. The car has had a mild redesign, is now able to have a more fulsome redesign courtesy of the new regulations, and we will wait to see what eventually emerges from that, whether or not we get the change in engine that I believe is going to be necessary with the current engine effectively not really available for production anymore, and mild aerodynamic upgrades as well. We could end up with significantly quicker LMP3 cars in their next iteration. Timescales for that, as yet, unconfirmed and unannounced, and it's not going to be very long before we start banging on the door of the ACO and asking what is going on with these regulations. I believed we should have heard the answer on these as early as October, November last year. So we're now some weeks late with this. It may well be that with other prototype considerations on the table, they've decided for the moment to put this one just slightly on the back burner, or at least on a lower light, if you like. But let's wait and see what emerges from the ACO on that front.
We are down to our final question in ACO world, my friend. Wek AsLMS, I believe. That comes in from our pal, Trawavasaurus from Reddit. How long do you think it will be before the next OEM confirms a car entry, regardless of the first race we see them enter? And also notes a press release for the second season counts. I propose a bet between the two of you. No need for money or overpriced circuit beer to be put on the line, but it does make it more interesting. I hoped for something around Christmas, but we are still waiting.
We've got time to wait, I think, is the other side here. There is no immediate urgency for these organisations to make a formal announcement. Will we hear sooner rather than later to confirm that they see these regulations as being useful in terms of bringing more competition? They do understand that this means that they've got to park their R&D aspirations for a little wee while. They're another manufacturer with their eyes on zero emissions in the second half of the next decade. But I would expect we're going to be hearing something around intent, if not confirmation, from Toyota. And I suspect, with some of the factors I know to be in play around some of the other aspirant programs, that we're likely to hear machinations and movements soon too. The stories you will have read elsewhere around Red Bull did not happen by accident. There are things afoot at the moment that mean that it's in the interests of some of the players involved here to make it very clear why they're looking at car at the LMP1 replacement, and when they're looking at that in terms of the way in which the Formula One market is actually currently moving, whether or not that means that they've got the need they will feel to retain their best talent on perhaps a secondary program, or indeed whether or not they want to place some pressure on the Formula One rule makers to ensure they don't feel threatened by another emerging player in global motorsports. Will it challenge a Formula One car on technology? No, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. If it all comes together, we could be looking at something very special indeed.
We are done with WC, AsLMS Series, and ACO, my friend. Where shall we go next on the Week in Sports Cars?
After the weekend we had last weekend over in Daytona, Marshall, it's simply got to be IMSA. Lots of news, lots of happening. You were there with my pal and colleague Stephen Kilby for what looked to be a fascinating few days on track at DIS.
It indeed was. And yeah, it was one of those typical roars where you rock up Friday morning and it's a huge blur, and then you're on the flight home Sunday night saying, what the hell just happened? So I believe, and this is mostly in video form, a lot of these have yet to, will be rolled out, so they've yet to be published, but I believe I did 21 or 22 video interviews over the 3 days, mostly Friday and Saturday. So that was a blast. Really, really enjoyed it, and lots of great stuff to talk about here. Also, and I'll have to parse through all of the questions that came in, but if we don't have one regarding the LA Honda TCR team and why they were sent home early. Got a little bit of background on what happened there, too, that we can fill in. So all kinds of fun. But where shall we start?
Well, let's go for a bit of a broad brush thing. LMP2, despite the fact it was by far the smallest class on track, has caused a lot of interest amongst readers, I'm sure in no small part because of work that I know you and Stephen actually did at Daytona, and Performance Tech making some pretty strident comments, it has to be said, about the way things have turned out in LMP2. We've got Patrick Lindsay, not that one, Adam Lavender, both from Twitter, Right Turn Lover, asking various questions around the LMP2 side, asking whether or not we foresee LMP2 making it past Daytona and Sebring. From Patrick, if the class goes to zero, is it dead in IMSA for good? Adam Lavender saying asking how long that LMP2 cars will last. Asking me whether or not the AsLMS would openly be excited and accept them as refugees. The answer to that is yes, of course. Entrance and entrance. And Right Turn Lover asking why more European teams haven't entered P2 full season with only a few teams to beat for a Le Mans auto entry or some tracks. Is it unattractive for teams? As the entry goes to the driver, and unattractive for genuine amateur drivers, as it's a lot of travelling.
Are you reading all the questions at once?
No, that's just 3 questions, all on MP2. What's going on, MP?
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm going to try and keep this short-ish. This is going to be our first soapbox moment of this episode. Can't guarantee it will be the last. So I'll try and touch on the bigger topic here before getting to the question, because I think it's necessary. The way the timing played out on IMSA establishing their LMP2 class went like this. For those who followed last year, opened the season at Daytona, the BOP was just completely not happy, copacetic for LMP2 entrants. They got their butts kicked. They were complaining from the outset, rightfully so. Got to Sebring, more of the same. That dynamic went on round mid-season. By Watkins Glen, we are in a position where BOP put the P2s in a position where they could succeed. We then saw a couple of wins on the trot between JDC Miller, Core Auto Sport. We saw victories finally happening in a nice cluster, which put the DPIs on the back foot. Well before that, we had the LMP2 entrants saying, hey, if we cannot genuinely fight for overall wins and go for the thing you've been telling us all along that we could do if we bought in, if we went and purchased these cars, got our engine leases from Gibson going, you said that we would be able to fairly compete for overall wins against the factory DPIs. Has not been the case. We've also, this is a secondary part, and this is probably the biggest driver, Graham, behind this class split. Hey, we have sold programs to gentlemen drivers, to funded folks, to sponsors, you name it. We have sold our 2018 program on we can compete. We're told there will be a level playing field for us, equal opportunity, and that has not been the case. So in order for us as small businesses to exist and survive, you're going to need to do something, and if you can't get this done through BOP, then you need to formally split us off into a separate class. So we can at least say, okay, maybe, customer, you're not going to be fighting for overall wins, but we can indeed hand you a first-place trophy in LMP2. There will be a separate point structure and championship for that come next season. Hopefully invite for Le Mans, for the winner of the class, etc. That direction was being pushed extremely hard the first half of 2018, Graham. And as I've mentioned multiple times on the show, in the Mid-Ohio IMSA paddock, I believe it was the first weekend of May 2018, I had heard from a couple of sources that this has been decided. This is going to happen for 2019. And I said, great, okay, the thing that they want is fantastic. This is what they've asked for. This is what they have pushed for. And they are now going to get it. Then something funny started happening, Graham. We had some of the loudest voices fielding the LMP2 cars really start to branch out and look at doing something different. So the voices that were pushing the hardest for IMSA to branch off LMP2 in 2019, got to do it, my business is going to die, etc., etc. Some of those folks who pushed for that and ultimately ended up getting that the first, I believe, the first weekend of August during IMSA's State of the Series address, the formal announcement of this class. I believe just a couple of days later, the JDC Miller team, which is fielding 2 Oreca 07 LMP2s, announced they're moving to Cadillac. Well, we almost cut the LMP2 grid in half with that announcement. And this is not speaking negatively of the JDC Miller team or its primary owner, John Church, but he was indeed the loudest voice pushing for the split. And so pushed for the split, got it, and then left the class a couple of days later to announce that he was going to be fielding Cadillac DPI. So good on him, but yeah. So we also have a case where much later in the year, we had the Core Autosport team, which was, the leader among the LMP2 entrants, leave LMP2 in order to run the fire sale Nissan DPIs that they were able to pick up from ESM. So just looking at this situation here, we had 4 entrants, Graham, in LMP2 last season. Core Autosport being one, JDC Miller / Gainsco being another, Pier 1 Matheson, also with the AFS sprinkler outfit, and Performance Tech. Well, again, by the time this had all been ratified and pushed for, it looked like IMSA was going to have a healthy LMP2 grid. That is the understanding that they made this change under. Okay, I realize we don't have a huge LMP2 grid, but it's enough for us to warrant splitting this off from DPI. Within days of making that decision, one main player said, we're leaving LMP2. By the end of the season, another team said we're leaving LMP2. That left us with 2 entrants, 2 single-car entrants to occupy this class. And so I must admit, I am extremely sympathetic, Graham, to IMSA on this topic, because they did what they were asked to do and then had half of the class bail out to go DPI afterwards. Had this decision been held until the end of the season, which they wouldn't have done, timing-wise it would have been a little bit too hard to organize this, but had they done that, or waited to make this decision a few weeks, even a week, I think they might have questioned whether they would do it, knowing that JDC Miller pulled 2 of the 5-ish cars in the grid out. So I would just say, it's easy to bash sanctioning bodies for their decisions. We're certainly the first to call them out when they do dumb things. I don't see this as a dumb thing. If anything, I think IMSA tried to go in the direction they were asked to go and then got bit in the behind by folks who decided that they wanted to leave. So, fair enough. Those entrants go wherever they want, do whatever they want. They were not bound, Graham, to running LMP2 in 2019. But this does come back to the question of, when half of your LMP2 grid says we're going to DPI, well, that's great for DPI. Still leaves 2 full-time entrants for LMP2 to start the 2019 season. That being the Pier 1 Matheson minus AFS, and that being Performance Tech. Great job to Daily Sports Car Stephen Kilby, by the way, for getting the jump on the Performance Tech story and their interest in possibly leaving to go AsLMS racing if the car counts do not improve in IMSA. I would say this, coming back to the central question now, maybe understanding the circumstances where P2 was added in as a class, Scott Atherton told me when I asked him about a month ago, we honor the things that we say we're going to do. We said we're going to start the class. We realize that we've had half the entries leave after we announced it now. We realize we're going into the season with a very small full-time car count. There's only 4 LMP2s at the Rolex 24, right? 2 from Dragon Speed, thankfully. They do not intend in being a full-time entrant. There is definitely a desire on IMSA's part to stand up and do what they said they're going to do. They are, Graham, in that sense. They're starting the season. LMP2 is a class of its own. But if we end up with the, I was just calling it informally, the Brent and Bobby show, Brent O'Neill, owner of Performance Tech, Bobby Ergel, the primary person at Pier 1 Matheson, if it's just a 2-man show, 2-car show, it could be fun. But, one car gets knocked out, one car has a problem, the other one wins. I don't know if that's a lot of fun. I don't know if business-wise, Graham, you can sell that and really have folks committed to a full season of something great when potentially you're in a very perilous situation of, oh, well, it's just us and the other guy. And if one of us has a problem, then, hey, we're potentially the winner. IMSA has also put some things in place where, based on car count, prize money, if there's a threshold, I believe it's 3 cars. I'll have to check that. But if there are less than 3 cars in an event, I believe the prize money is cut in half. Granted, prize money is not a big thing, but still, for these privateer teams, Graham, it does matter. If we do get to a place where it's just PR1 Matheson running their Eureka 07, I do have to believe, coming back to the primary questions here, although IMSA wants to be a stand-up organization and honor the thing they said they would do, I think they're going to have to look at a bit of a rolling commitment. If we get to Long Beach and there's one LMP2 on the grid, I have to believe that they're going to try and BOP that car as they did last year and work it back into the prototype fold. Tricky though, right, my friend? We have now created we've created a separate LMP2 class, but at the same time, there's also been a quote new class in DPI. Everything ran under the single prototype category last year. Would IMSA, because it only has one full-time P2, if that proves to be the case, effectively turn off the P2 class at those events and then roll that car into the DPI class as some sort of weird kind of non-fitting toy? I don't know. I can say this. They would not make the DPI class go away, meaning, well, hey, we don't have enough P2s to warrant a class of its own at particular events. So at those events, we're going to abandon DPI, abandon LMP2, and just go back to calling it the one jumbled house prototype. I cannot see how that would happen, owing to the fact that we have more than 10 factory DPIs in that class. And if you want to see a bunch of raging, angry manufacturer representatives, just tell them, hey, by the way, through nothing you guys did, we're going to make this class go away for an event and just call it prototype again. So this is a tricky thing. I don't want to overstate things, brother, but this has the potential of being a really complicated and unfriendly thing. The easy answer is you just keep LMP2 going everywhere. If it's one car, it's one car, and maybe that's what they do. Hey, we created it. If you show up, you show up. If you don't, you don't. But we'll have at least one bottle of champagne ready atop the podium if you want. How do you hand out points if you're the only car? I mean, again, there's a lot of ugly things that I know IMSA does not want to have to look through and have to figure out. Nobody would want to. I don't know how this turns out positively in 2019 to close, and come 2020, where you and I have heard, hey, there actually could be a bump in P2 interest for the following year. Well, that's great. Telling me that, hey, things suck today in this class, but boy, we hear it's going to be great next year. Okay, why isn't it great now? I don't know if I believe any of that, but I think the bigger question is when we get to 2020 and we head to the Roar, will we still see cars with the giant and admittedly hideous LMP2 stickers atop the windshield, as we had this year, to call those out compared to DPIs? Or will there be just a quieter inclusion somehow in what DPI is doing, and they're kind of a sub-DPI class that doesn't necessarily warrant its own, call it LMP2 categorization? Not sure what happens, but definitely concerned that we might not have a proper LMP2 class unless a number of folks invest in a full-time effort here fairly soon.
Good stuff, MP, and neatly summed up. As is often the case, it's not always the simple answer, is it, to the bigger question that reveals what the journey was to get there. We've got a lot of stuff to do with the RAW, to do with the GT classes and to do with DPI, but there's one point, you raised it just at the top of the show. We do have a question from John Nottage on Facebook, who's asking, is there any more insight to the reason why and how the LA Honda World Racing TCR car did not make the minimum weight at the RAW? There seems to be some dispute in details, says John. Were they caught cheating? Was it an honest mistake? Or what do you know?
Well, just prior to leaving the event on Sunday, got a message from Luis Pericarpi, who's one of the team principals there, asking if I wanted to hear his side of the story. And I said, yes, please. I'm about to fly, so drop me an email. Just send me something text-based, because speaking is not really an option right now. Didn't happen. Finally heard back yesterday and said, well, I don't really want to do that. And then basically sent me something that read a lot like a press release of excuses and whatever. So that's fine. Here's what I learned from a source that I will not reveal, but can say that this person would know exactly what happened. What I understand, Graham, about this Honda Civic TCR issue was this. Cars were reportedly received a little bit later than was optimal for the team. Team turned up to the roar without the necessary amount of ballast created and then installed in the cars. And ballast is an interesting thing for those listening. I'm sure you've probably heard of and know of ballast, what it is. Every organization will set a minimum weight for all of its cars and all the classes. Most cars are delivered below minimum weight, and in order to meet minimum weight, ballast, usually some form of metal, is then bolted into the vehicle to bring up its minimum, to bring its weight up to the minimum. And for the mass-producing manufacturers, those who are, pumping out a number of race cars, they will often create a specific area, maybe a box, where that ballast can go into. Makes the installation area easier for those who do it. Not every manufacturer happens to do that, though. But regardless, while you might buy the car from brand X, what doesn't show up in the car, Graham, or in the boxes, is ballast for the vast majority of the time. So what that means is teams need to then make their own. One example I provided to the person who was telling me about what happened, who would certainly be in the know, was back in the day when I was a young race car mechanic, the Pfeiffer Ridge Racing team that I worked for also had a little racing tire operation on the side, sold Firestone tires, and we would often mount and balance tires for racers as they came to the Sears Point track. And when their wheels and tires would come in, we would remove the lead wheel weights and save them in a 5-gallon bucket. And so as we would, again, just process wheels, mount new tires, we would always save the old wheel weights because those were perfect ballast items. And so we would get some square tubing, usually 1.5 inch, maybe something that wasn't massive but was big enough, cut those in approximately 1 foot lengths, weld and cap the end, melt the lead wheel weights, and then pour those into those pieces of square tubing, and would drill 2 holes through them and bolt them to whichever cars we happen to be running to meet minimum weight. But bottom line was, we would either, that was a fairly lo-fi way to do things. There are many other ways of doing things. Some teams go to the fitness store and buy weights, the actual plates you would put if you were doing bench presses or similar, buy those and either just bolt them straight to the car. They might cut them to, those tend to be round. They might be cut into whichever shapes or sizes to fit whatever mounting mechanism in the cars. As I understand it, what happened here with the car showing up late was the team rocked up to Daytona without the ballast installed in their cars. And what I was told is they informed IMSA that they did not have the ballast, that they were, again, apologize for that the Michelin Pilot Series manager was informed, approved it, and or gave it the wink and the nod that, okay, we understand. We're not happy, but we understand, and we'll let you run for now kind of thing. And then the team went out and managed to go P1 and TCR session after session, which then drew the ire of the rest of the TCR field. And I would say appropriately so, Graham. And as a result, they were then asked to leave. And although there was I'm going on another person's account, but someone who would know exactly what happened, was told that the team was up front that, hey, this is the thing we're missing. I'm told it was less than 100 pounds, but it was a lot of weight, right? I'm not talking a couple of kilos. I'm talking a lot of weight. And you're going to run much faster than the others if you are lacking that ballast, Graham, and if you're running below minimum weight. And even if the series is trying to help you and be accommodating to say, okay, well, you did show up, and I know you need the mileage here, and we tell you to come here, I think there's a bit of a threshold that, of course, if the other TCR team is saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't working. And again, from what I have been told, IMSA then said, yeah, can't argue with that. You guys didn't show up ready, so go home. Now, here's the question that I have. I've had to go across the street from Daytona International Speedway to a rather large facility called Dick's Sporting Goods in the past. There was one year, a couple of years ago, where I forgot my helmet. In order to photograph on pit lane, you must have a helmet, traditionally or typically some sort of cycling helmet or something. It's a large store, Graham. You can purchase those weights that I mentioned. I'm not saying this is optimal, but I am telling you that as someone who has spent decades of my life working in racing, a couple of those decades as a mechanic, as a person, making ballast, installing ballast, it's a little bit of a DIY mindset. Truly, across the street from the facility where these cars are testing is the very place that has large chunks of metal with their weights, the weight value stamped on top of them. You could walk up and say, I need, pick a number, 50 pounds of ballast per car. Well, I see a plate there that says 20. Right behind it is one that says 20. And next to it is one that says 10. 20, 50! And you buy 2 sets of those. And you mount them in the car. That was the summation of the conversation that I had with the insider on this of, if you really wanted to, you could have, maybe, again, just throwing this out, maybe for the first session, for whatever reason, gosh, the transporter was late getting here and all kind, hey, IMSA, could you please let us run the first session without? We're not going to go crazy. We're make sure that we're going to hold our tongue, if you want to put it that way, and not just run some big flashy lap times that anger everyone else. But we've got a couple hours to the next session. We're going to send our guys across the street, get the weights, come back. We'll cobble something together that's safe. It's not permanent, but just at least to be in compliance for the test. Look, man, I've had to make that run to get stuff so I could be compliant with IMSA. They wouldn't let me continue to go on pit lane without a helmet if session after session, knowing that I could indeed solve this quickly. I am not exactly sure, Graham, why this very basic concept was not employed. And finally, other thing too is you could go around to some of the other teams and say, hey, because this happens all the time, hey, boy, we need a couple of this size bolt or these nuts, or we needed this. Teams regularly help one another out, trade things, give things, pay one another back, whatever. Going up and down the paddock saying, hey, need some ballast, could you help me? That certainly would have been an option. I don't know what all they played out, as again, I asked Lewis to share his side of the story, or he offered to share his side of the story, then rescinded it. I don't have their take, but I certainly have a pretty solid summary as to what happened there. I don't understand it, man. I don't understand it at all.
All a bit odd, isn't it? It does seem to be another one of these situations where a common sense solution was neatly avoided. For one reason or another. And I don't know, MP, was this just one where a quick fire decision was made and the ball was dropped and it's messy?
Well, also potentially very damaging to the team's name and our reputation.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, is just the bigger thing to keep in mind. If you cannot show up prepared, they didn't announce the event last week. It had been on the calendar for a good while. If the cars, again, did show up 2-3 days before and it was a thrash to get there, that happens every year with a couple of teams. So, no negative comments there to offer if that's indeed what took place. But if you are showing up and your cars are running many, many pounds underweight, again, you could have fixed this problem while there. I saw a team, I tweeted out a photo of a team sanding and spray painting one of the little pit haulers, right?
You did.
I'm just saying, if you really want to do something, even things that aren't traditionally done at the event in the paddock, if folks can be sanding and painting a damn pit hauler, Graham, I'm sure folks can wander across the street to Dick's Sporting Goods, drop about $100 on weights, bing, 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 everyone's happy, no one complains. Maybe Dick's Sporting Goods needs to start advertising their potential ballast options, or just having someone stroll through the paddock with a little sandwich board yelling, "Ballast! Come and get your ballast!" Not sure what needs to happen here, my friend.
Shame. Sad, isn't it? But yeah, we move on. Well, we'll fingers crossed, hope they come back and that their TCRs weigh just a little bit more. That's enough of TCR. The big news really was in pace, wasn't it, MP? And a couple of questions we've got, particularly about fantastic performance from Mazda Team Yost through the Raw test. We had plenty to say about the changes that have been made by John Doonan and his merry band in leading up to it. Lots of questions around what was achieved, but in particular what might now happen. Let's go to start with from Potato Nigel Marnif on Twitter. Apologies, it's the wrong question. It's actually Giuseppe excuse me.
Are you murdering his last name? That's usually my job. You're taking work away from Americans, you
I'm trying to make Britain great again, and my God, we need the help. Mazda Team Yost saying that their huge lead in qualifying over Caddy and Acura was because they were already pushing the car to the maximum. Do you believe it? And do you think they'll get dialed back in with BOP for the Rolex 24? From Giuseppe. My apologies for mangling the name Giuseppe.
No worries. Giuseppe, I believe at 100% that they were pushing, and I am faithful that they will not be bopped on the head with some sort of draconian balance of performance adjustment. Not sure if it will have gone up by the time this podcast posts, Graham, on Racer, but I did file a thoughts and ruminations from the Roar column last night. One of the items in that dove in right into this question, and very interesting. So Mazda Motorsports Director John Doonan, from the very beginning of the weekend, was vocal, not necessarily super publicly, but did tell some of us in the media, we are going to go out and push as hard as we can in race trim And then what come qualifying, we're going to do the same in qualifying trims. So you're going to see us giving it our all instead of trying to play the traditional sandbagging games. And there were many sandbagging games going on, not just in DPI, but in many classes. That's what they said they were going to do. Now, here's where things get interesting, Graham, and hopefully folks will give this a quick read on Racer.com. It's one thing to say this, hey, we're going to go out and give it our all. We're not trying any hijinks with BOP. They also went to IMSA and laid out that exact plan to the series as well. That, to me, is a bit of a different and interesting approach. That is something that also was taken at face value and accepted by the series as being a truthful effort. I spoke with IMSA competition VP Simon Hodgson yesterday about a variety of things, and this was one of them, and gave a very interesting, a supportive comment where he said, I commend John Doonan for that approach. He says, I'm sure some of his peers would say this is John going on the offensive. He's lobbying through his BOP, but the reality is, when he came to talk to us, we said, don't focus on other people, focus on your program. You've got some great drivers in that package, and he's further expanded his investment in people, and he's doing the best he can to make sure his program is correct. So I loved this approach, and this comes back to Giuseppe's core question. Yes, I am very confident that they were running flat out, and IMSA was there having been alerted to that for the reason of, as Simon mentioned, hey, we're going to be honest with you here about what we got. Don't beat us up when it comes time to do the race BOP. And it sounds like that could and or should be the case. Was there at least one other manufacturer in DPI where through Friday and even parts of Saturday it looked like they might have been artfully managing their pace? Yes. And as we've seen at the Roar last year, and it might have even been the year before, but I know last year in particular, Graham, IMSA was very, very pointed in their efforts to get to the manufacturers they thought were intentionally sandbagging, getting to them early. So rather than do the test, gather terabytes of data, and then see, now we see that they're coasting into the braking zone here 50 feet earlier than usual. Drivers are picking up the throttle, a quarter second later coming out of the bus stop compared to their rivals for no particular reason. That's why their lap times are off a little bit. They're intentionally doing this. Rather than wait to discover these things after the event, what they have been doing is looking at that data not only in real time, but essentially doing a dive ASAP, and then calling meetings with those manufacturers, saying, cut it out, show us what you have, or else. And we then saw some speed improve in DPI, and again in some other classes as well. So I believe that there is more speed to come from some cars in DPI here. Giuseppe, we can say that the Core Autosport team, their very first laps with the Nissan On-Road DPI was at the Roar, and they have a lot of work to do to get their chassis to where they want it to be setup-wise and otherwise. So the lack of pace with the Nissan, I don't believe that there was any sandbagging there. It's just having to learn the vehicle. It was also, Graham, interesting to hear from Romain Dumas, who mentioned he was really surprised the shape of the car when it turned up. Just said it was just dirty and grimy and really did not look like it had received a lot of love or any love after Petit Le Mans. And sometimes teams do that. If you know you're shutting down, you're not going to spend a lot of time polishing everything and making it pretty. He was just surprised that the team had to defunkify their chassis before they went to go test. But we know there's going to be more speed coming from that as the team learns the car. We also have the Cadillacs that were there fastest in some sessions and or not too far off the Mazdas in some others. But yes, on sheer pace, qualifying pace alone, the Mazdas were rockets. And so what it's going to come down to, Giuseppe, is will IMSA say, okay, we know that they were telling us the truth about what they have, and we see that there's the ability for others to either go faster because they were sandbagging, or we can speed the others up, or will IMSA look at the performance capabilities of some of the other cars and say, we feel as if they're at about their limit of how much faster they can go without creating issues of reliability, things blowing up and whatnot. So we do need to pull the Mazdas back because they are the outlier. One way or the other, what I don't expect to happen is for Mazda to be truly penalized, meaning knocked back to the second or third fastest DPI because they showed their hand. If everything functions as it should, IMSA should treat the Mazda as in a way where it is just as capable of winning the race as any of the others, instead of the slap on the wrist, the BOP slap on the wrist for going too fast at the roar. I'll throw in one other thing here too, Graham, which just speaks to potential. The team did a lot of work on the cars, Multimatic, mostly responsible for the performance gains found with the chassis during the off-season. We also have, if we're looking at the car that set the fastest time, we also have Lena Gade engineering that vehicle. We have Dave Wilcock on the other. Don't forget the engineering talent involved here. Ollie Jarvis going P1 in a prototype, I think we're all accustomed to that. He's amazing. Just keep in mind there's been a pretty serious upgrade in engineering capabilities to go with the vehicle upgrades. So, yeah, altogether, I think this was an organization, not just the cars, flexing its muscles in IMSA for the first time since it put a DPI on the grid.
That sort of answers the question for Nick Dovniak, who says, asking what the biggest surprise and how big of a nerf bat the Mazda DPI on the Acura GTD is going to be hit with. But we've got another couple of kind of peripheral questions that follow on from those points, MP. First comes from Ed Huris. It's for you specifically. If you're the team manager engineer at the Raw and you were trying not to show your hand, what methods would you employ to accomplish that objective without getting caught?
Well, just mentioned a couple of them. You can try and do some things through the software, right? You can ask, depending upon the class or team that you're in, working with your engine technician to fatten up the motor a bit. Instead of leaning it out to try and make more power, you can try and fatten it up a little bit. But again, that's going to show, these are all things that can be detected fairly easily by IMSA. Wacky calibrations or things to underplay the capability of the engine and so on, those are things that can be done. I mean, if you're really... I don't know if you want to go that much further in terms of, say, putting in a slightly incorrect gear stack so that you are not revving the motor to its full capabilities, more on the acceleration end, right? If you're coming through the down the straight towards turn 1 and you're just banging off the rev limiter, everyone's going to hear that. The series is going to know that you've either gotten your gearing wrong or you're intentionally trying to limit your top speed. There's some things that are pretty easy to get caught on doing. So from a putting in the wrong gear stack to, trying to have engine calibrations done in a way that pulls back a little bit of power, these are all things that can be done. Don't get me wrong, but I think IMSA has enough people and enough knowledge now to be able to spot those things. Really what it comes down to is driver. And asking your drivers to, in a organic way, to either brake a tiny bit early or even a tiny bit late, right? If you are coming into the braking zone, braking a little bit late, that's going to upset your turn-in point. You're not going to have an optimal exit coming off of a corner that might be very important for lap time. So, as we see, we sometimes have teams, I shouldn't say sometimes, when teams are trying to artfully manage this, what you normally get is go like hell until late in the lap, and then do something to blow off that lap, so that on our end, we can see and get all the data that we want to see you coming into turn 1, going through the infield, exiting onto the banking at Daytona, then going through the bus stop. And it's usually some sort of thing in or around the bus stop where, again, you're braking too early, you're braking too late, and or getting ready to leave the bus stop. It's some sort of picking up the throttle a little bit late, upshifting early so you're not winding the motor out all the way. Those are the things that you tend to see in terms of requests on how to manipulate a lap that still looks good, if not very good, without showing absolutely everything. Then again, if you're trying to piece together data, you can also then ask your drivers to give the first portion of the lap something that isn't 100%, but really tie together the second portion of the lap. And so they ace the bus stop and ace the run up to start finish through the banking. In terms of just piecing data together, you have not indeed done a full lap at maximum attack, but if you're pulling data, you then do have 2 laps, which you have effectively created enough where you can assemble 1 lap that gives you a proper and accurate representation of what the car is capable of doing. Again, all of this said, IMSA knows this, Graham. IMSA knows the bus stop is the place where miraculously cars seem to just lose performance sometimes, and or coming out of the bus stop, it only takes upshifting a few hundred RPM early through the gears to just bring that top speed down a little bit. It's not so much the top speed, it just takes a longer time to accelerate to get to start finish. And so, it could be a couple tenths of a second, but those are the clean little ways of carving things off of a lap time. But yeah, again, pre-IMSA playing Big Brother and dropping all kinds of data monitoring capabilities onto the cars for their own use, super easy to do these things. It's much harder to get away with this kind of skullduggery these days, though.
It's a great question, though. Not the same question, but again related. Thomas Cale from Twitter says, with the Daytona lap record having been unofficially broken this last weekend, and Bathurst's unofficially broken under 2 minutes at the end of last year, will these be officially broken? I presume he means in the coming races at both Daytona and Bathurst. And one of the other great lap records make your jaw drop if broken. Should make clear, by the way, the Bathurst lap record was broken by a car that was not compliant. It's not the case with the Mazda Team Yost entry for the Raw. The Audi AsLMS in the hands of Christopher Mies that posted that sub 2 minute lap, you're absolutely right, Thomas, was effectively running outside BOP, effectively unrestricted. So very quick indeed. I'll answer on Bathurst. If you want to have a crack at what you saw at Daytona, do I think the lap record will go at Bathurst? I think it probably will. The development of GT3 cars is far from standing still. You'll be aware, Thomas, I'm sure, that they do not get the current iteration of GT3 cars for this year's race. For that, for the 2019 cars, you'll have to wait for the 2020 Bathurst 12 Hour. But, the more development, the more time that teams get with these cars, the more of the performance they can unlock, and the more that they understand the effects of the cars and their setup has with whatever BOP is being applied. So do I expect to see lap records challenged? I absolutely do. We've got some stellar driver squads coming for the Bathurst 12 Hour this year, and I'm delighted to say I'll be there to see it.
When I was, I think, in the paddock on Saturday, I don't know, morning or afternoon, bumped into our pal Sebastian Bourdais, and among the topics we discussed, he mentioned that Timo Bernhard from Mazda Team Yost, those two happened to catch up, and Timo said, we are going to obliterate the lap record once we get to qualifying. And boy, was he correct. Almost I believe, right about a half second below the 1993 All-American Racers Eagle Mark III lap set by P.J. Jones. How's this? This is a genuine thought. Maybe it's a bad one, but, that's how my brain works. Monday is the 1-year anniversary of the loss of my good friend Dan Gurney. And I will tell you this. I am super happy for IMSA to see that its DPIs, LMP2-based cars, are able to lap that circuit. It's mild reconfiguration of the bus stop from what they used in 1993, so there are a lot of variables in here, but I am incredibly happy to see that these DPIs are capable now of, at least at Daytona, well, I shouldn't say at Daytona, matching some of these kind of pantheon of great lap records that stand from IMSA's GTP era. There aren't many, but this is certainly one that has been held up as a true testament to the quality of those GTP cars. 26 years later, finally, a car in this Mazda's been able to get below that lap record. Knowing that the Big Eagle were, just a couple days away from that 1-year anniversary, it did occur to me, Graham, that I would not be bothered in the least if qualifying was rained out. Well, I shouldn't say rained out, but if it rained like mad during qualifying when we go back for the race, just to let it stand a little bit longer. So, if provided we have no rain, provided the weather allows, yes, not only do I expect Mazda to get below it, but I would expect some of the other brands, Cadillac in particular, possibly Inaccurate, to get below it as well. This is all, though, again, unfortunately coming back to the 3 letters that we hate the most on the show, BOP, depending on what IMSA does with BOP, not on any specific car, but just is there going to be an effort to pull the cars back a little bit? Are they happy with where they're at? If there are BOP changes that maybe dial back the DPIs a little bit, then maybe that will be in question. Other thing to note, and they admitted this right up front, that Ollie Jarvis, on his unofficial lap record lap, did get a very nice and healthy tow from the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac. So if there's a proper tow in place, I would say it would make it even easier. Could they do it without the tow? Very possibly. But we'll have to see what happens with BOP, and also if those Mazdas will take turns towing one another around to set laps. If those things happen, then yes, in theory, we should be able to set a new official track record. And of the things I meant to do today, maybe tomorrow, is to ring our pal PJ Jones to talk about this and get his thoughts on possibly seeing his long-standing lap record go down in what I have said and consider to be the greatest GTP car ever made.
It's great to see, wasn't it, as well, that I think Ollie Jarvis's first words after that lap were in tribute to the capabilities of those cars all those years ago. It's exactly the same way as we heard Timo Bernhard after obliterating unofficially the Nürburgring lap record, paying tribute to, well, I think his hero, Stefan Beloff, and his miraculous lap. I'm not going to kind of name the laps that I'd like to see go, but I do think we've got an interesting moment coming in March. Remember, we have not seen current spec LMP1 cars around Sebring at all yet, and those cars have not been tested yet at all around Sebring International Raceway. Here's an interesting question.
Well, let me also throw in, we have about 30 minutes left, my friend. So
okay, I'm going to rush through this one, because this one is going to be just a mouth-watering one, which is, I don't see IMSA wanting their DPIs to be blown away by too very much by LMP1 cars. I think we could see some blinding speed at Sebring come March.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that'll be amazing. The one I'd like to see, it's outside of sports cars, but Arie Luyendyk's all-time qualifying record from the Indy 500 dating back to 1996. I don't think we're going to see it this year, but I know that once we get to IndyCar's new engine formula for 2021, where they're wanting to eventually get to 1,000 horsepower, I think it's time for a new lap record at Indianapolis. Something in the high 230s, a 240 mile an hour qualifying average. That would be just downright ridiculous.
Let's go with Sean Romig. We've talked a lot about DPI and LMP2. What about the GT classes? Sean says, with the increased participation and pace in IMSA's GTD class, of course for GT3 spec machinery, is it finally time to raise the performance window of GTLM with less regard to absolute parity within the class? With GTLM participation possibly dropping even further next year, at what point does it become difficult to justify the class or its impact on other classes?
Wow, there's a whole bunch of good stuff in there, Sean.
Isn't it just?
In speaking with Simon Hodgson touched on this for sure, and my goal is, after I get the Week in Sports Cars posted, to get the interview with him about class performance levels, whether there might be any changes come the race in terms of either speeding up a class, slowing down a class, etc. And he suggested that there was a relative level of happiness of the class split, performance-wise, how fast the GTD cars were versus GTLM, and also mentioned, as you touched upon, Sean, what I thought might have been a door for him to open. Doesn't sound like they feel there's a huge amount of performance to open up in GTLM to do, as you mentioned. Now, so this is always the multi-edged sword, Graham. We know for a fact that if you buy a Ford GT road car, you're going to get whatever the number is, 650, 700 horsepower. Same with the Corvette, same with many of the supercars that play in GTLM/GTE. We also know that per the regulations, they are dumbed down to about approximately 500 horsepower. So on the surface, you might say, well, hey, Pruitt, idiot, there's 200 horsepower, unlock it. Well, true. Just keep in mind the rest of the car is proverbially sized to that power number, meaning the brakes are sized to suit the speed and performance capabilities delivered by 500 horsepower. The aerodynamics are sized to fit the pace delivered by 500 horsepower. The gearbox, the cooling, you name it, everything about the car is sized to match that power figure. So where IMSA could say, okay, we're taking off air restrictors and we're freeing turbo boost, all those things could be done. You would then have vehicles that are not truly able, Graham, to perform in a highly acceptable manner, because they're going to be showing up in braking zones at a crazy top speed that the brakes over a 24-hour race, a 12-hour race, and so on are not meant to handle. So the other counter argument could be, but these are factory teams, right? Lots of money. They could go and just buy bigger brakes. And yes, again, all of these things are potentially feasible, but I can't think of a single GTLM or GTE manufacturer said, yes, tell us to change everything and let us go spend millions on redeveloping these cars. In reality, IMSA could do this. The ACO, WC could do this, but it would have to be a year-on-year change. Look, we're modifying this class approach as a whole. Manufacturers are getting more power. You now have whatever the duration of your off-season to develop these cars, change everything you need, add the aero that you need, blah, 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 to really fall in line with the power changes. So that's why the uncorking the GTLM car argument, which I love and I'd love to see happen, it's not really something that can be done for a race or really at the onset of a season. It would have to be a big wholesale change, and one where manufacturers were given plenty of lead time to develop those cars to suit this unleashed area of performance.
Crackle was something a little bit different. It does affect the DPI market, but two questions in a similar vein. One from Start Raving 6 on Twitter, the other one from Matt Hawkins on Facebook, and both surround revelation that Toyota will not be releasing their contracted drivers to do double duty at Sebring with the WC and IMSA. Start Raving is asking what's the reaction around the paddock to Toyota coming out with the removal of their drivers from running at a DPI, saying Wayne Taylor has been quite PC about it, but he's wondered how IMSA and other teams have viewed it. He says the interweb says WEC feeling threatened by IMSA's success. I'll answer that one in a moment. You two. Matt says, what's going on? Toyota not permitting them to race due to them being there at the start of February. If this was the case, where do FIA, WEC, and IMSA contingents go in terms of allowing drivers racing in various teams in the future? Maybe future contract clauses. I'll answer one very quick part of that one, which is Start Raving. Nothing to do with WEC. This is a decision by Toyota, and they do have a record of ensuring that their driver contracts put the LMP1 program they're signing these guys to as the overarchingly dominant factor in other contract negotiations. We've seen before, for instance, Sebastian Buemi having to give precedence to his WC program over Formula E, which actually potentially cost him a driver's championship in Formula E. So there's not anything that's particularly unusual about it. It is an extreme example, most certainly, because those drivers will be at the same track. Where are you on this one, Marshall?
I find myself in complete agreement with Toyota, Graham. This is a case of, as we see in many other sporting leagues, where a star player or star players are signed, and in their contracts, it says, no hang gliding, no bungee jumping, no things that are going to jeopardize your ability to render those services for us. And not because the series, league, team, or otherwise is just no fun-minded, but because their success is built around the presence of those star players, in this case star drivers, to deliver the championships that they're after. And if you think about the money being committed on Toyota's part, tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, a Fernando Alonso, a Kamui Kobayashi, a Mike Conway, letting them do the Rolex 24, I get that. It's a fairly benign track compared to many others. We have, of course, seen some big crashes. Those are a little bit freakish, but on average, we do not have big super driver injuring crashes each year there. So I get the Rolex 24 allowance. The Sebring factor of saying, no, you're coming here with us, you're racing with us. I get that. That track, we have seen some pretty big stonking crashes, but also from a focus standpoint. Hey, we don't want you just running back and forth between paddocks, exhausting yourself. You're going to Sebring for us to win the race, and we're just going to have you focus on us. I get that. I would make the same call. I would do things exactly as Toyota has done if I were the manager of that outfit, and saying, Rolex 24, got it. That's kind of the fun season opener. Everyone rocks up and plays. Very low percentage chance of you getting hurt. After that, we're going to need you to be 100% focused on us, and especially at Sebring, right? That's a WEC round, Graham, right? This isn't a WEC round. Mm-hmm. This is something where, of course, I want you 100% focused on us and what we are paying you to do. Our promotions are built around you. Our success is built around you. All eyes on us. Smart call. Really smart call. Do I think the Wayne Taylor team was hoping to have Fernando Alonso back in the car as their third driver for Sebring? Absolutely. And could this open the door back up for a Ryan Hunter-Reay, who has been their third driver? Hopefully, possibly. Are there some other good choices for them to consider as well? So I think, fun time at Daytona. After that, the fun stops.
Running in on time to move to our general and fun questions. Let's just crack on with a couple more IMSA questions, though. A couple about surprises. Nick, Dovniak asks, what was the biggest surprise from the Raw? And Jim Kaiser is saying, repeat from last week, he says when he jumped the gun on asking a question, some early predictions for the 24. Are there going to be surprises, good and bad? Will Risi pull off the GTLM surprise?
Risi, it was great to see them lead a session. It was great to see the Ferrari 488 GTE in this works kind of affiliated effort pop up and do well there. At times during the Roar, biggest surprise, I think Mazda's the obvious one to point to. I don't think folks would have been surprised to see the Mazdas lead a session or two. To have them lead the majority of the sessions and have a couple of 1-2s and then just obliterate the rest of the field in qualifying, I think that was a big surprise. Diving a little bit deeper, I'd say the other big surprise for me was BMW. And again, I can't speak to BOP or any artful stuff going on there. I can say that with the BMWs coming on strong-ish to close the 2018 season with their M8 GTEs and IMSA, I did not expect those cars to be decidedly last in GTLM throughout the Roar. I think, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but I think the highest that one of their two entries rose was fourth in one session, but by and large, in a 9-car class, Graham, the BMWs hovered between 5th and 8th or 9th, possibly. They were the one of the 5 manufacturers that just was not featuring on the stopwatch at all. So knowing that those cars are capable. One of the notes that I mentioned in the story I filed to Racer was, at least in GTLM, this is the one model that stands out more than all the others for IMSA to take a deep dive on that, the information, all the data that came off those MHGTEs run by BMW Team RLL, and see if they need to tweak the BOP to get those cars into a place where they can play. Why at Daytona? Well, as we've mentioned more than a few times on this show, you and I will never forget the hand-delivered, limited edition press releases from BMW during last year's Rolex 24 about their dissatisfaction of the BOP set for the MHGTE. I don't want to see that again. No one wants to see that again. I think everybody, even if you're not a BMW fan, would just like to see all cars being able to fight for a meaningful result. IMSA obviously is going to look through the datagram and find out if that was something that they need to tweak via BOP, or if there were other non-BOP reasons for the cars not being able to get up near the front. So those are the two main things. I mean, I'll just throw in quickly GTD. There were three manufacturers there that really stood out throughout the event, that being the Mercedes-AMG, Porsche, and Acura. The Acuras are very strong. Ferrari was also quick at times as well. There were a couple others that weren't so awesome. So, yeah, I'd say approximately half the manufacturers in GTD appeared to be right there. Some others, Audi at least stood out to me as one that in the Pro-Am GT3 base class might be worth looking at a little bit as well. Possibly Lamborghini too, defending manufacturer's champion. Sometimes you get that a little bit where you do super well to close the season and you maybe get the reins pulled back a little bit to start the next, but that's why they hold the roar to determine what indeed needs to happen tweak-wise for the race.
I'm going to throw in one final IMSA question before we move to the general questions. There's a good reason for it. You recall for the last 3 weeks we offered a prize for Question of the Week. My apologies, because I've been very busy and on the road. I've not nailed down prizes for this week, working on something for next week. But particularly wanted to mention our prize winner last week, which was Bonnie Lass, 1947. And got a lovely email from Robin, and thank you very much for that, Robin, who has decided that she would like to actually give her prize to the guy who's asking the next question, for reasons that she believes he's helped her and many, many other people along with their understanding and appreciation of sports car racing. That's what this is all about as well, of course. Delighted to say that my good mate down under, Floodman 11, you've got a package coming to you, and I'll be bringing it to you at the Bathurst 12 hour. So thank you, Robin, for that. That is a massive gesture. And Floodman, it's a tribute to your work with the WC Reddit group and your good group of friends there as to what has been going on. So here's the second part of the prize. Here's your question. It's one for you, MP. Which driver new to the IMSA paddock impressed you most at the Raw? Someone like a Zanardi, a Chaz Mostert. He himself was quite excited to see how Simona de Silvestro goes in a GT after her V8 supercar experience of late.
I'll throw out two, and they both happen to be three. 2 in GTD, 1 in DPI. Not a surprise, and I should say there's no reason for me to be impressed, but Kamui Kobayashi. He is a bad, fast operator of motor racing vehicles, something we've known. I just love the fact that, Fernando Alonso, highest profile guy within that team, one of the two highest profile at the event, alongside Alex Zanardi. I just love the fact that, Kamui is getting the job done. And in terms of pace, I know the Wayne Taylor racing team was appropriately impressed by him. Like, wow, we knew he was good, but we didn't understand this guy was this good. So that's just great to see. Just appreciation for someone's talent in a different context, in a different series. Not a surprise for anyone who's seen the man race, but at least coming to America, it felt good. I would say in GTD, Anna Beatriz, a.k.a. Bia Figueiredo, a.k.a. she's got about 5 different names. It's great to see her go very quickly in qualifying to lead things, actually, in the Meyer-Shank Racing Acura. I know that there were some questions, because I fielded them from a few folks, asking whether, boy, is she kind of the odd woman out in that team in terms of pace? Got Catherine Legg, you've got Simona Di Silvestro, you've got Christina Nielsen. Where does Bia figure into things? So it was really cool to see her go very quickly. And the other one, which I will say was a bit of a surprise, was young Aaron Telitz, good old Aaron Telitz from Wisconsin, someone who has committed the last many years of his life to what was known as the Mazda Road to Indy open wheel formula, and was trying to get to IndyCar, still hopes to get there, but has taken a bit of a sideways step to compete in IMSA. He with the AIM Vassar Sullivan Lexus team, and when I spoke with Aaron on Friday after turning his first laps, he was like, man, I'm slow. I don't fully get this, but I'm trying to. I've got some great teammates to try and get me up to speed, but first time driving with a roof over my head. Then I caught up with his teammate Townsend Bell yesterday and just said, hey, what do you think about this Telitz kid? Because I love the kid. For he's just a great kid, highly talented as well. Excited to see how he got along. And Townsend could not heap any more praise on the kid. Said, boy, by the end of the weekend, super fast, got it, plugged right in. Happy for him, and I'm hoping that this turns into something for him, Graham, meaning a real employment opportunity for the long term. He'll be with the AVS Lexus team for all 4 endurance rounds. But yeah, maybe this kid, instead of having to scrape up money each year to keep his career going, maybe he could actually become a paid person in IMSA. So I really liked that aspect as well. And I'm actually going to grab one here quickly from Paul Kruper, who says, any update on Brian Herta's Hyundai effort in IMSA, that being in the Michelin Pilot Series, and was texting with Brian this morning, and he said, hey, it was just a case of our cars, the new Veloster N TCRs, they showed up last week. They just showed up in our shop last week, so rocking up at the Roar to play with them, not an option, but we will be at the race weekend, and all will be good there. So,
the thing is, they probably could have got there, but they probably would have had the ballast fitted. It would have gone all horribly wrong.
Yeah, well, unless they maybe put it in the driver's lap. That would be fun, right?
Excellent stuff.
A bit of pain and suffering there.
We're going to move along to the kind of some of the general and fun questions, MP, because we've got, I reckon, about 15, 20 minutes tops to go here before my phone rings, the call I've got to take. I'm going to go with one that we overlooked from last week. Mike Toy from Facebook. Hi, MP and GG, long-time listener, first-time asker. We like them. He's getting married next year. Congratulations, Mike. And for his stag do, he's heading to Le Mans for the first time. From your combined experience, where are your favourite places to view the action around the circuit? Any secrets you have to getting the most out of the race week? Looking to stay at the Porsche curves, hoping for a competitive race between the LMP1s. Mike from the sunny south of England.
Why don't you take this one? Because I just said a lot of words and my mouth rambled a lot.
Right. Well, my first bit of advice is going to be utterly pointless, bearing in mind it's your stag do, which is don't get too drunk. I'm not saying don't get drunk, don't get too drunk. Don't waste away the opportunity in a alcohol-fueled haze for the entire long weekend. Do get out there and enjoy the event, please, Mike. Best places to watch the race? Got to be in the absolute cauldron that is the tribunes and the start-finish straight for the start and for the finish of the race, without a shadow of a doubt. If you're there at the Porsche curves, and I'm guessing with our good friends at Travel Destinations, that's a great place to watch these cars. Absolutely, right on the ragged edge, clinging for grim death onto every piece of grey they can actually claw away at. I actually really like watching down from Tête Rouge. Inside or outside, doesn't really matter, wherever you can get a vantage point safely. There, you really can see who is trying, who has actually got the really good run down to hurl the car down the first aspect of the Mulsanne Straight. But there is a reality about Le Mans. And if you have been there, you'll understand this. Wherever you watch, there is camaraderie and there is spectacle. It is an astonishing, astonishing event. And if the weather plays ball, you are going to have the time of your life. Congratulations again. What I do, just make sure you get around to as many parts of the circuit as you possibly can. Forgot to mention, by the way, Indianapolis and into Arnage, another place there where you see the cars coming down from super, super high speed through into Indianapolis, hard on the brakes, and then hard acceleration for another very tight turn, and then hear them, particularly if they're running alone for a short time. That sound goes on for a long, long time before they head down towards the Porsche curves.
And I'll just throw in a new word here. So you mentioned camaraderie. I would say there's also alcohol too. So a lot of fine folks who will hand you a pint or a beverage. Everything Graham mentioned, co-sign 100%. Tete Rouge, I would say from the inside, you might consider that. So driver's right, standing atop the viewing mound there. That might give a very interesting perspective, and if you like taking photographs, you might be able to get a couple of clean shots there. So yeah, you can really see the speed of the cars blasting through Tete Rouge and down the long straight there. So other thing I'll mention, and I'm not sanctioning doing anything illegal, but there are some really great viewing points that aren't necessarily structured and organized for fans to sit in or stand on. I always see every year as I drive around the circuit heading to photograph somewhere, a lot of folks out walking around, and not just town locals, but clearly race fans who say, hey, what if I kind of wander over towards this part of the wilderness and wander through? I hear the cars. Maybe I'll go walk through this little forest and see what I can find. And so, again, we're not sanctioning you doing anything you shouldn't, but one of the great parts of enjoying motor racing is not just going where they try and funnel you into, but saying, okay, well, what's over here? And if you can get there, get close, to the track, to a fence area that you might see a different perspective. It's another part of the great aspects of Le Mans, Graham. It's so big. At 8.5 miles, it is a huge circuit. There's vast portions of it that are just not really structured for fans to sit in a grandstand or otherwise. I don't know if all those places are meant to never be explored or investigated, though. So that mindset might also help you.
Oh, absolutely. But do be safe. Be safe. Very high speeds. If there is clear reason to stay behind a piece of infrastructure that's designed to keep you behind it, stay behind it.
Unless you're a photographer, of course, because as we've seen, photographers like to just wander out onto the track and get whatever they
Absolutely.
need. And bear attacks,
yeah.
please be very mindful. Canadian bear attacks, they do.
Yeah, if Delalana's there and he brought his bears with him, he does tend to pack the full set of bears, Paul Delalana, for the Le Mans 24 Hours. And on occasion, they have get out the motorhome, and it does get messy, grisly almost. That's what I would suggest.
Where shall we go next, my friend?
Well, here's one. Matt Nieder, actually, comes forward with a very long question, but he'd like us to consider a moment for IMSA Where Are They in 2019 series of questions, asking about a number of drivers and wonders what's going on with them. There's one I can answer, the others I can't immediately. Two, in fact, I can answer. Alessandro Balzan, Jörg Bergmeister, I can answer about Jörg. Cal Marcelli, Lawson Aschenbach, Alvaro Parent, James French. Well, Jörg Bergmeister is with the Project One team in the FIWEC, and actually that is a team that is at the moment leading that championship and going very well indeed. So Jörg is a very crucial part of earning that team a Pucker FIWEC championship, and that certainly is going to be his primary program. There are other Porsche blessed programs, though, still to be announced for the remainder of 2019 moving forward, whether or not that be in GTE or indeed in GT3, either side of the Atlantic. So let's wait and see on that one. Alvaro Parent, well, we saw Alvaro back in a McLaren at the Gulf 12 Hours at the end of last year. McLaren at the moment have only one, well, maybe two if you include Joe Osborne, and I would, senior GT drivers assigned to their factory blessed program as they launched the 720S GT3 onto the marketplace for 2019. Beginning to start to see some of those customer programs coming together. I wouldn't be remotely surprised to see Alvaro picked up again by a brand with whom he's had a great deal of success. I don't know about the rest of the names, though, MP.
I did see Balzan. I didn't get a chance to speak with him, but saw him being queried by Calvin Fish and Lee Diffie. Need to check in on that, to be honest. Kyle Marcelli, great. I had actually forgotten. I know that Kyle did some great work last year in the 3GT Lexus. I hope to see him back. Lawson, and yeah, another one that I need to check in with. James French. He's actually part of the Performance Tech LMP3 program. So, yeah, he's another one who I'm hoping there's just some really good guys like James, like Kyle, etc., who I hope are not, cast to the margins here going forward. Let's see, I'll grab a couple of general, and we need to close on some fun because I don't know if we had enough fun in the last episode. Let me see. Cale Peister, what is Paul Tracy up to? He's been posting that he will have news later this week, a lot of cardio training, and a picture of him ahead of Elio at Indy in 2002 is motivation. Having just turned 50, will he be in a car for the Rolex 24 and or Sebring? The answer to this, Cale, is I don't care. Yes. I stuck my head into, I think it was the Action Express Racing tent on pit lane. I was actually looking for Gary Nelson there and couldn't find him, and happened to see Paul peeking his head in from the opposite side, and was moved to just keep walking afterwards. I don't genuinely care what that man does. Joseph Ostrowski says, Happy New Year to the both of you. Graham, you often speak of the exciting talent that is, and I apologize in advance for murdering speaking Dutch, not one of my things that I'm good at. Joop van Uitert.
Correct. Yeah.
Where are we likely to see him in 2019?
Well, I know where we're likely to see him in 2019. I have been asked and have politely asked and have agreed that I won't reveal that before his new team is ready to make that reveal. But he is, I believe, if things are still as they were a week ago, in a potential championship-winning LMP2 spot for the 2019 season, and quite right that should be so. I just managed to get a bit of a walk down the pit lane before darkness fell and the team headed off for dinner here at Buriram, and I can tell you lots of movement in the LMP2 and LMP3 marketplaces in the closed season. There's a lot of news to come about teams, drivers, where they're going, where they're heading, a real mix and match. But Joop van Uitert, I think his primary program, I think you can expect him to be in title contending position, and we should hear about that in days, not weeks.
And Cale, I should say about the Paul Tracy question, that wasn't anything negative towards you at all, and thank you for asking it. That's just someone whose racist leanings have me completely unplugged from whatever he might be doing. I'm going to go to Jordan Hopwood quickly. He says, if and when the Ford GTE program ends, could we see some of the drivers that were taken from other manufacturers returned back to their former manufacturer, or is it more likely that they will stay with Ford? There's some things. I haven't really said much about the Ford potential follow-up program, and that's by intent, Jordan, and not trying to be cagey here. I have gotten some pretty good intel on what could be happening, and so I know there are some other outlets that try and put out little things, updates that really don't say anything, so I've tried to avoid doing that as well. I can mention here that I have it on pretty good authority. Around February, we will know, not publicly necessarily, but at least behind the scenes, there will be some direction specifically on drivers and what they may or may not be doing in relation to working with the Blue Oval after the 2019 IMSA season. I have not gotten any clue on the WEC side, Graham. I would say it's actually worth separating those two altogether. So I think come post Rolex 24, we're going to get a better idea of what might be happening for Ford come 2020, knowing that this Ford GT effort is about to start, or has just started the clock on its final of a 4-year program here, and have heard some things, Graham, that I will save probably for something written first on potential DPI front, but some very interesting developments, and some things that I've heard from very good sources that lead me to believe there could be a very unique angle of what could happen with Ford and DPI, provided everything goes forward. So they're going to buy Honda. No. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and reveal it. I'll go ahead and reveal it here. Ford is returning to prototype in 2020 with the Riley Daytona prototypes that they ran through the 2015
It's been coming for some time.
Yep. So DPs are back, baby. It's actually going to be IMSA's third prototype class. So DPI, DP, and maybe LMP2 if it survives. So hashtag breaking exclusive scoop on the Weekend Sports Cars. All right, brother, we got 10-ish minutes or less, maybe less.
Yep.
Where should we go with fun and off topic, knowing that it seems like half of the words that we happen to use are off topic?
Well, it's a belated, because he asked this last week, off-topic one from Graham Ingleby, who asks, Happy New Year to both. What's the best month of the year for sports car racing? Is it January with its excitement of things to come, December and the end of the season, June and Le Mans, or is it another month? MP, where is it for you?
I'd say, Graham, January. And folks probably get tired of me saying this last weekend at the Roar, but it just always feels like the first day of school. You don't know what's ahead, but you're happy. Well, in theory, you're happy to see everybody, and there's new things and colors and fashion and just wow. You show up. There's a bit of a reset that's taken place. Hopefully, although I know, have been nonstop traveling, covering motor racing, so it might not be that feeling. But Mr. Ingleby, I would say January for me, because it's just fresh and new, and there's so many great drivers and teams that show up for the Rolex 24 that it really does have an element of excitement that, although June has nearly the same level for me, by then we've all probably been to 10 races, 15 maybe. It's great, but the battery's already worn down a little bit, so that's my answer.
For me, I quite like the January time as well, but it's not a particular month I like. Despite its physical and mental challenges, middle to the end of January, because we tend to get quite a lot of news actually breaking around that time. Daytona 24 Hours, which is a great start to the international sports car season. I don't want to ignore Asia, Le Mans, but that's a season in progress, all the 24 Hours of Dubai, but the Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona, and then rolling into the Bathurst 12 Hour, which I think is just one of the most spectacular GT races on the planet. That is a great place to go motor racing. And we wrap that up actually at the end of February with Sepang and the end of the Asia Le Mans series, which, as regular listeners will know, it's something I'm involved in. I thoroughly enjoy those race meetings, and we get to finally nail down what we're going to see in June at the Le Mans 24 Hours.
I'll grab two quickly here. I apologize, you told me to stop grabbing, but I'll do it nonetheless. Shay Martin Small says, "Hey, MP and GG, who's your Rolex 24 dream team of drivers and car? Hashtag me personally would love to see Brendan Hartley, Earl Bamber, and Shane Van Gisbergen share a Porsche 911 RSR. Go Kiwis." I would also say, Shay, you got to wedge Scott Dixon in there. So you could have your quartet of Kiwis. What would your dream team be, Graham?
I go for the grey-haired trio of Dindo Capello, Tom Christensen, and Alan McNish, simply because Tom and Dindo surely owe Alan the opportunity finally to get a free watch.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant. Let's see. Zach Anderson says, "I know at least Graham has a decent-sized model collection going. Not sure about MP. Do you have a recommended place or website for finding decent GT, not just Le Mans, and prototype models in both 143rd and 118th scale cars? It's fairly priced." Zach, I do indeed. I'm looking up at probably 20 or 30 118th models. And I've just had to essentially stop because I've run out of space, and there's just, a couple boxes of 143rds that, live in a closet. So, plenty, but I have had to slow that down just for space restrictions. At least in the U.S., I go to the motorsportcollector.com, my friend Paul Zimmerman, and I believe they're all fairly priced. I mean, he's, there's kind of I think a normal price for such things. And so, that's where I point to there. In Canada, we obviously have our friends at torontomotorsports.com, big player and part of our show. They sell models as well. Any thoughts on either British or European model resources, Graham?
I have to tell you, I tend to browse on the internet. I do like to support specialist suppliers, but I do tend to browse on the internet. My particular bent with models is my son used to collect 143rd models, and when I first started writing, he would be along for the ride for some of those race meetings, trawling the paddock with a holdall full of models to get the drivers to sign them. They're up in the loft now and probably worth a tiny bit, hundreds of them. I actually now collect the kind of 1/64th scale things because, one, I've got space, and two, it doesn't cost very much money. An asset of which I don't have a lot right now, but that is my now infamous window ledge collection. This is the Hot Wheels size of cars, but there are some beautiful scale models made there too, and I have a couple of rules around them. It's got to be interesting. But it gives me actually an opportunity when I'm bored and browsing around an airport to pop into a general goods shop or in a motorway service station and just have a quick look what's in the bin to see I don't mean the bin, I mean the bin on the shelf to see what's perhaps come in with Hot Wheels or insert similar name of US or Japanese or European model maker. And I've picked up some absolutely fantastic stuff down through the years, and it costs pennies. It's a great way to do it, and it keeps the fires burning for me.
Do you keep those 1/64th in hats for cats by any chance?
That would be a good way to do it, wouldn't it? There's a time for just one more, and apologies, we will again roll over. We've got very many of the ones we rolled over this week to next week's show if we possibly can, and it's going to come from Kiwi Chris from the WEC Reddit group. Howdy lads, he says, in about 2 weeks' time I'm about to board a plane, travel 17 hours or more to tick off a bucket list item and attend my very first 24-hour event. He has 3 questions. Are you completely insane? Yes, you are, but that's not to do with this. It's because your friends tell me so. What's the one must-do thing to do at the track? And will we have Kiwis winning in both GT classes? He reckons we just might. What do you reckon, Marshall?
Well, let's see. Howdy, lads. In about 2 weeks, I am to board a plane and travel 17 hours or more to kick off a bucket list item and attend my first 24-hour event. He didn't tell us what 24-hour event. So
it's got to be Daytona.
I would hope so, but again, I'm just saying. Are you insane? No, actually, yeah. I think you're committed.
He is.
You're committed. So that's
no. I've heard from his friends. I've checked out with his friends. Okay. He is insane. Okay. Yeah.
Assuming this is Daytona that you are heading to, what's the one thing you must do at the track? Well, okay, this is going to be a shameless plug. Friday at 4:45 at the Mazda activation joint in the infield, you need to come and see the Week in Sports Cars live with Marshall Pruitt and Graham Goodwin. We're going to have Mazda drivers there. We're hopefully going to have some other good folks there. We have some free Week in Sports Cars t-shirts that are Mazda themed to give away. I would say come and hang out and have fun with us. That would be a really smart thing to do at Daytona. But in terms of things just straight up at the track to enjoy the cars, wander down towards the second horseshoe in the infield, because not only do you get to see the cars coming at you at a very high rate of speed, braking heavily, turning right, you also get to see them powering away, and the just audio quality of those cars as they rocket away, that part is insane. So I would just say, please do that. It will make you very, 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 very happy. And will you have Kiwis winning in both GT classes? Very possibly. I mean, there are some very good Kiwis in the field, so I would say if you are a betting person, stick your money in now, because I think you have a fair shot of making money, at least with one class victory.
MP, I'm out of time, and I've got to make a very important call, which may become clear in the weeks to come as to what this one's about. But it's an exciting program looms. We've got exciting news to be posting in just a few hours' time after we get through this edition of the Week in Sports Cars. We will, as I say, I hope with Ryan's help, roll over those questions that we missed on this week to next week's edition. This has been a blast.
It has been, and you need to either go to sleep, wake up, make a call, do something. I have no idea what time zone you're in, but we love you. We love the fact that despite continual exhaustion, you're always making great time for us to do this show. I am Marshall Pruitt. That is Graham Goodwin. Please check out dailysportscar.com. Visit racer.com if you want to read whatever nonsense that I happen to do. Thank you to Cooper Tires for sponsoring our show. We hope to see you Friday at 4:45 at the Rolex 24 in our live show, and we'll be back to you next week with the Week in Sports Cars.